We're not live yet.
Yes, we are live.
We are live.
Hello, everybody. We're live.
Hello.
This is our very first SmartElections YouTube live stream, and we are so new to this that we do not even know whether or not we were live, but we are. So thank you so much for joining us. It's really exciting to be here. I'm Lulu Friesdat. I'm the Executive Director of SmartElections. And this is...
And yeah, it's not Zoom anymore. It's something bigger. And we're so glad to have you here. If you registered, you'll be getting some emails from us. If you didn't register, we're glad to have you anyway. And if you're listening to this after the recording has been done, great to have you. I hope you get in touch with us any way you possibly can. So before we get started, I'd like to introduce you to the YouTube format, which you may already be familiar with. But in particular, off to your right, there's a little thing that says chat. I'd say I can't see it right now, but I think it says live chat. If it doesn't say live chat, switch it to live chat. That is where you will be able to enter a question for Lulu or Doug Jones or whoever's here. And we will see that here backstage at our production facilities. And we will present that question to our speakers. So if you enter something below the YouTube channel, that's just legacy comments. And we're glad for nice likes. Please like us, like SmartElections. Please join our SmartElections YouTube channel and our Facebook page, which you'll see in a bit. So anything else I should say, Lulu, before we get started?
I think that's pretty good. I want to say this is our third election security forum. The first one was recorded, and you can find that on our YouTube channel. So after you subscribe, then just take a look at our different videos there. And one of them is the forum that we had on June 6th, I think was our first one. We're going to be having these forums every 2 weeks. And this absolutely is not a one-off. This is a kind of thing that you really have to get involved in and stick with it. And the more you learn, the more effective you'll be able to be. And the more you learn, the more you'll want to be effective, because you will understand how incredibly important this is. So stay with us. The next one is going to be August 11th at 7 p.m. And best thing to do right now is just put it in your calendar and make sure that you're going to be with us in 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks after that. And next time you'll be here and bring a friend. So each time we're going to be getting more and more people on board.
That's so right. It's an ongoing thing. It's kind of like a course. And before I forget, we should remind you there will be a Zoom call happening after this, and we will post. We will not post the Zoom link because we don't want it to be Zoom bombed, but we will send it to you if you have registered for this broadcast. So you'll be getting an email with the Zoom link. We encourage you to join Scrutineers and learn what you can do to do something about all these things that you're going to hear about soon.
Right. So now, let me just explain that, because not everybody knows what Scrutineers is and how it's related to SmartElections. So I'll just give a little bit of background about myself and our process here. So I'm an election security journalist. I've covered election security for over 10 years. I have done numerous investigations about how easy it is to hack our voting machines. Some of those investigations received millions of views. And as I was doing this work, what became apparent to me is that I was putting the information out there and people were upset and concerned, but things weren't changing. And what I realized is that it really was going to take a whole nother level of activity and focus to actually start to change things, that I couldn't just keep putting the information out there and telling people about it. I needed to actually start helping address these issues. And so last year with some colleagues, I co-founded SmartElections. The mission of SmartElections is to elevate election reform to an urgent national priority, which it absolutely needs to be. And we have a few partner organizations, and one of them is Scrutineers. They are their own separate organization, but we are working hand in glove with them. That's an organization that was started by Emily Levy, another longtime election security advocate. And what she's put together there is a wonderful, wonderful organization. What you find when you start to learn about election security is that it's complicated, can be overwhelming. You're not quite sure what to do. You're not sure if your fears are well founded. You want to know a little bit more information, and you want a little bit of a guided tour. And Emily has developed that very skillfully at Scrutineers. And it's basically a whole world that gives you training and support and connects you with other people who are concerned about this issue. And so we're going to be doing these forums. They're educational and fun. You're going to learn more about election security, and then we're going to connect you with other people who are also getting activated and want to work on this issue, and we're going to all be working together. So at the end of our forum today, we're going to have breakout sessions where you can join other people in a Zoom room. We'll have some from different regions, and we'll also have one that's just for scrutineers in general. So you can, kind of pick, do you want to focus on your region or you just want a general orientation? And that'll be toward the end of our forum today. So that's the explanation about scrutineers. Back to you.
So you have a lot more to say, and so I'm going to go backstage. But before I do, I'd just like to introduce you, if you've not met her before. The woman talking to you is Lulu Friesdat, who is a broadcast journalist and filmmaker, and part of an award-winning team, an Emmy award-winning team from ABC, and one who has garnered some 4 million views on her various posts on election security. And with that, I will head backstage and let you take over.
Hey, so it's great to be here. And I'm really glad that you're here with me, because I think a lot of us sometimes feel really alone with the fact that we don't trust the results of our elections, or we don't have confidence in them. And it's really great to face this together. It's a little bit scary and intimidating. And the more of us that work on this together, the more effective we're going to be in actually setting up systems that can give us confidence in our election results. And we can do that. So tonight's forum is on foreign interference and insider rigging. And we've had a lot of information over the past 4 years. Since 2016, we know that our elections were interfered with. That's the word that the media tends to use. They say the Russian hackers accessed voter registration databases in all 50 states. And they also say that they were successful in a couple of those. In Illinois and I believe Arizona, they actually successfully got through to the voter registration databases. We know that in Florida, in 2, possibly 4 counties, there was successful intrusion by hackers. But it's all a little bit vague. We don't really know the details. And what we're told over and over and over again is that the votes were not changed. But when you really start to dig down into it, if you look at the statements that are made by the intelligence community, what they have said is that they didn't actually look to see if the votes were changed. They say, basically, if you parse their statements, that's not their job. Their job was to find out, if there was interference, not if the election results were changed. And so when they say no votes were changed, what they're actually saying is we didn't look to see if votes were changed. So actually, we don't know. To this day, we don't know if votes were changed. There were some recounts done in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, but they were there was a lot of obstacles to those recounts. They were very incomplete. In Wisconsin, for example, many of the counties just ran their ballots through voting machines again. That's not really a recount. That's just basically running your ballots through a machine. It doesn't actually tell you if your count is inaccurate, if the machine has been hacked. So what we'd like to know, really, in a much more specific sense, is what happened? What was this interference, or what could it look like? What would foreign interference actually look like? And one of the best places, I think, to look for this information is in this new film that came out from HBO called Killchain, and many of you may have seen it. It's a very gripping film. If you haven't seen it, I highly suggest you watch the whole film. It's on HBO now, so if you've got HBO or if you've got a friend, just grab them. I come up this film on HBO with you. But right now we're going to show you one clip toward the end of the film where the film actually features a hacker who did get access to a US election system. So we've got that clip queued up for you. And this is from the HBO film Killchain, the cyber war on America's elections. And I think we're ready when you are, Chris.
How long after election you FOIA? More than a year. And then we got this whole package of documents.
Really interesting here when you start looking what they explain.
Alaska system was compromised, but it was compromised by a completely different actor. That actor is named Cyberzeist, and sort of linked to a Twitter account that has a sort of past history of hacking other figures. They talked about how the attacker had originated from what appeared to be the IP address of a power plant in India. State officials had to report to the FBI, and there was more than officials here had originally led Alaskans to believe.
To me, if this is the whole documentation, then there was never a proper investigation. They didn't take this serious. This was quickly brushed over, saying, okay, it's contained. So this is the whole, we cleaned the whole problem, it's all fine. And nothing to see here, we were not hacked.
I am cyberzeist, or what I like to call myself is not zeist, it's cyberzeist. But the actual pronunciation is zeist, obviously. Zeist was derived out of my gaming handle back in the days when I used to game a lot. Means game in the morning and hack in the night. I have tried to depict as much as possible a distant image from my real personality on the cyberspace. Because it's not my real identity. I can alter it the way I want. It's an individual. So the Alaska Elections website has a very simple portal. It was looking very badly made. So on 6th of November 2016, in the evening, I found out that Alaska Elections website administrator panel can be accessed only through the Alaskan IP address. I set up my system so that my system represents that it is originating from Alaska. There are two empty fields. One is to enter your email ID, and the other one is to enter your password. I could input certain kind of instructions in place of your username and password that will produce an error that will give the details of what is installed inside the database. Through that, you can easily access each and everyone's user account and password that is available inside the database, even the administrator's ones.
They are making a claim here that the attacker got access to the file system, and they sort of kind of leave it there. If you have that kind of access to file system, you can simply replace files and gain control of the system. Security researchers like myself, this tells that whether they believe what they say themselves doesn't matter. This tells that the truth is likely to be way worse than what they're saying, clearly worse than this explanation. There was no containment in effect.
I had root access, which just not only allowed me access to make small changes, but granted me full access of the system. The amazing thing was I was able to access the GEM system particular, which hosts or stores the actual live voting data of US presidential elections in 2016. I could have made any changes in the system. I mean, the changes like deleting the candidate. I could kick anyone out. I could alter any data, any vote. It was such a rush that at that particular moment, I felt like I was the god at that time.
So it's really very, very disturbing clip. I'm sure that watching it, you're as disturbed as I am. And I want to just point out two things about that clip. One is that the system was set up with a kind of protection that no one was supposed to be able to access it unless they were in Alaska. And I think from a particular Alaskan portal. And the hacker had no problem simulating that. He was able to access it from India. So that did not stop him for a moment, didn't slow him down. And the password also didn't slow him down at all, even though he was needed to have a username and a password. He was able to just put some code in there that simulated a password, and he got right in, and then he had access to all of the passwords. So the thing about election security and our defenses is that when you're protecting a system, you have to be right 100% of the time. And when you're attacking a system, you only have to be right once. You just have to find one chink in the armor and you're in, which is what happened here. Although here, apparently, there were multiple chinks in the armor. And that's why when people say, when election officials say to you, our defenses are airtight, there's no way these machines can be hacked, I assure you we're solid. It's great that they're taking precautions and that they feel confident in their defenses and that they're spending more time on their defenses, but it's always sort of a one-upmanship game. And the more they improve security, kind of the more clever and persistent the hackers will get. And I've been to DEF CON 3 times now, and I've seen it. I've seen how incredibly persistent and brilliant the hackers are, and they will get through pretty much anything. At the voting village, 3 years in a row, they have been able to compromise, I believe, every system that has been there. The only system last year they weren't able to compromise was a system that wasn't up and running. They weren't able to get it up and running long enough for the hackers to compromise it. But other than that, they really get through. So this is something for us to be aware of, and that's why we're going to have another forum. We're going to focus on audits, and that's why audits are so important, is because audits are the way that we can check if a system has been hacked. We know that our systems can be hacked, but what we have to do is every race, every election, check that they have not been hacked, and we do that with audits. And in order for audits to work, we have to have ballots that are auditable, which means they have to be a clear record of the voter's intent. And some voting machines create that and some don't. So we're going to talk about that in another forum. And again, that's why I encourage you to keep coming back. I hope that by now you've put that in your calendar, that on August 11th at 7 p.m. we have our next security forum. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to watch a clip of the director, one of the co-directors of Killchain. His name is Russell Michaels, and this is his second film about hacking. His first one is Hacking Democracy, which was also an HBO film, also a great, great watch. So now I hope we've got that one queued up, and we're going to watch this interview that I did. I pre-taped this interview with Russell because he's in the UK and it's really late there, and he was like, "Ooh, that's going to be the middle of the night for me. That's not going to work." So we pre-taped this, but I still think you're going to find it fascinating, and then we'll be able to talk about it a little bit. So this is our interview with the Killchain co-director, Russell Michaels, and hopefully you got that ready for us, Chris. When we were speaking, you told me that there was a lot of mystery around this hacker. So briefly, if you could just tell us, like, how did you contact him and how did you manage to get him to the interview and all of this mysterious process of setting it up? Because I think it's a really fascinating story.
The first strange thing is that he wanted the world to know that he'd accessed Alaska's, and what he accessed was the central tabulator called GEMS, the actual computer, the central brain that brings in all the votes from the voting machines and accumulates them and produces the result. Who won? So he bragged on his Twitter account in 2016, "I've gained access." No mainstream media seemed to notice or take that seriously. I decided when I found out what he'd done was to try and understand from him why other experts would say it was credible. So I contacted Cyberzeist, not knowing exactly where in the world he lived. We did a series of Skype calls and emails in which I asked questions. Meanwhile, I was FOIAing the Alaska Division of Elections to find all the emails, internal emails I could, that showed that they recognized they had been hacked, but they didn't think it was serious.
So when you say FOIA, not everybody knows what that is. That's the Freedom of Information Act. And so when a journalist does a FOIA request, basically they're accessing documents that government agencies are required legally to provide to the public. So, and pretty much government emails are all subject to these Freedom of Information requests. So you were getting hold of the Alaska election officials' email accounts, and it showed that they actually knew that they had been penetrated?
Yeah, they said, Commissioner, our system seems to have been accessed. He says he got into the system after just trying various states. On the 6th of November, 2 days before the election, definitely gained access on the 7th and continued on the 8th. I think CyberZeist, this is his handle. He was a member of Anonymous years ago. He was surprised at his own success. Ari Hursty, our expert in the film, thinks that he used a tool that he won't tell us about, and that tool allowed him to jump from the public website that he had already broken into, and from there into the computer system called GEMS that was in the office of the Director of Elections.
And he was someone who was foreign, is that correct? So this was foreign interference.
Absolutely. He admits to hacking the system from India. And there's a question as to whether he or any associate of his still retains access to that computer system. So I'd like to summarize CyberZeist as I think, one of the greatest threats to America's elections. Not just him, not saying him personally. I think actually he's quite a moral person. He told us he believes in democracy. He doesn't think elections should be rigged. He was testing as to how far he could get in and what he could do. But he represents the kind of attack that isn't a virus. It's not injecting a virus into the system. It's someone getting in, obtaining full administrative privileges, can upload files, download files, change text, change votes, and sit there inside the system as an administrator that the rest of the systems people and the Division of Elections don't know about.
What you're saying is that a hacker could gain access, stay inside of an election system where they could change any votes they wanted, and just stay there for years and years and years, changing election after election after election. Is that correct?
Or just waiting until the one election that they wanted to influence.
This particular incident was foreign interference, but we could also have insider rigging this way. Somebody who works in the elections could also easily access a system this way and keep changing results as well. It could be either this type of interference could be from both foreign and domestic players, correct?
Correct. My understanding is that once the access is completed, I mean, CyberZeist found a vulnerability. There hadn't been a patch, and that allowed him to access the website in a way that got into its kind of, core program. And then from there, he got further into the office and the election system itself, because the election system shouldn't be connected to the public-facing website. But he says,
hey, Chris, we need to stop the broadcast. Is that in the UK? Can you turn the audio down?
Okay.
Yeah, so apparently we've lost our stream. It's back, but temporarily said stream suspended for policy violations. Well, we had permission for everything that we showed. That was a interview with the director of Killchain.
How do you know we lost our stream?
It's in the comments. Everybody's saying they didn't. In the middle of the clip, YouTube took us down and suspended our content. So there was nothing wrong with our content. We had permission to show the clip from the director, and we showed an interview of the director.
Did they give cause?
I don't know. So yeah, as Bruce says, go argue with Google. So we will take it up with Google. There is, I think, more and more what I would consider a certain amount of censorship happening on YouTube and on Google.
Hey, Doug.
So, hi. So let's just, this is Doug Jones, and he's going to be our next guest. So we'll move on here, and I'll go ahead and start the interview with him. So what was your response to the clip and the interview with Russell Michaels, Doug?
Well, I I've been familiar with all of the principles in Killchain since before it was even being made, and there are really no surprises there. This is really a fair description of the state of election equipment nationwide. It's not just Alaska. It's fairly typical of what I've seen visiting election offices. There are similar stories about hacking into the Washington, D.C. election office. There are similar stories about others.
Right. So I want to give people a little bit of an idea about your background so they understand how knowledgeable you are about this actually. So Doug is a professor of computer science at the University of Iowa, and he is a co-author of a book with one of the founders of Verified Voting. He also was on the Election Assistance Commission's TGDC, the Technical Guidelines Development Committee, which is kind of a big bunch of words and acronyms. But what that means is that's the committee that has a tremendous amount of oversight and input on what voting machines actually are allowed to be used in the country. The guidelines that they create are voluntary. Unfortunately, they are the voluntary voting system guidelines, but many states do still try to comply with them in some way. So it's a very influential committee, and Doug was on that very early on for 4 years. So he's really someone who has a deep, deep knowledge base of how voting machines work, how they get approved, kind of the politics of it, as well as the technology of it and the computer science behind voting machines. So he's an extremely well-informed individual, and we're really delighted to have him here with us. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
So now we're going to switch gears a little bit. So what we were looking at there was a clip of foreign interference. And one of the things that Russ made clear was that it could be anyone. This could be someone from India, like Cyber's, but it could also be an insider at an elections office. It could be a political operative. It could be somebody who just is wanting to make a tremendous amount of money. Entrance to these systems could be sold for quite a lot of money. So it could really be anyone who could be engaged in this type of activity. But one of the, when I was interviewing Doug I interviewed him multiple times for different articles that I wrote. And during our interviews, he told me this anecdote that has always stayed with me about some voting machines in the South and a salesman who was selling them. So go ahead and tell this anecdote for us, if you would.
Okay. 15 years ago, I was at a voting system conference. Did I drop out just then?
The audio's a little bit choppy. I think just speak slowly and clearly, and I think we'll be able to hear you.
About 15 years ago, I was at a voting system conference, and I ran into an elderly man who had been a salesman for Computer Election Systems Incorporated back in the 1970s. And his territory was somewhere along the eastern seaboard between Georgia and Virginia. The Carolinas were in there. I don't know exactly which states he was in, but he had a story about going, this was in the era of punch card voting machines, the Votomatics, and he had a pickup, he had a van with a small computer in it and a punch card reader for reading the ballots and a whole pile of ballots, and voting booths, and he would go into the courthouse to demonstrate to the county election commission, and he would set up a model polling place. He would set up his computer and the card reader, and he would demonstrate how the system worked.
So he was basically he was like a traveling salesman selling voting machines.
Right, and this is how voting machines have been sold since 1900. So, except of course they were smaller and lighter by 1970 than the 1900 ones, which are 170 pounds, 700 pounds each. So in any case, he goes into this courthouse, he sets up his machine, and he lets all of the local election officials and members of the public who were present fill out ballots, and he tabulates the election. He prints out the report of the tabulation of the election. And I'm sorry, when this man told me the story, he had a delightful imitation of the Southern accent, and I just can't do that. But he said, one of the commissioners said to him, I see how this is the unofficial report of the election, but how do I get the official report of canvass? And the salesman's reply was, well, this is the report of the canvass. It's official if you sign it. And the man said, no, I don't think you understand me. How do you make it the official report of the canvass? And this went around for several go-arounds until the salesman finally understood that what this man wanted was a way to adjust the numbers to reflect the election result which the County Board of Elections approved of. And his response was, oh, I'm afraid we don't offer that in our product. I'm sorry, we're into honest elections here. And he was offered a sheriff's escort to the county line and told never come back.
And
that's not the end of this.
These were the election officials of that town. These were the people who were already counting the ballots, right?
And they wanted a way to tinker with the numbers before the final report was printed.
Right.
Now, the unfortunate thing is that several years later, an acquaintance of mine who was a voting system examiner for Pennsylvania found in the software supporting this particular Votomatic product, found that indeed they had put in the tools necessary to make arbitrary alterations to the numbers. And so apparently the vendor caved eventually, and someone in the programming staff put in a way that you could slip in a specially marked ballot to alter the count in any race.
And that was part of the program, and it was in the manual, right? It was in the actual manual. How to do that. And basically what you're saying is you have your official election results, how the voters actually vote, and then there was an actual program that allowed the election officials to take another card and put it through and alter the election results however they saw fit. And that then would be the final results. And this was part of the program, and it was in the manual.
Right. Who knows? There may have been some cockamamie legitimate use for this, but any legitimate use ought to be reported in the final report saying this number was altered by this much, and someone had better have an explanation for that alteration. And that feature wasn't there. It was unauditable. It was a way to completely alter the numbers before reporting them.
Right.
It was very scary to find that this is apparently the normal course of doing business.
And what was really interesting about that story, which is a story from Mike Shamos, who I hope we'll have on to tell it personally, he said that the next year he checked, he noted that this was happening and complained about it. And then the next year, when he did the same inspection, the page in the manual was missing. They had ripped that page out of manual, but the feature was still there.
Right. Instead of altering the software, they simply altered the manual.
Right, but people who knew how to do it knew how to do it.
Right.
Right.
So we don't know that similar problems are present in modern voting machines. We really don't know, because that software is not exposed to any outside inspection. The inside inspections have terrible difficulties simply because the software in your typical voting machine today is so huge.
Right, there's millions and millions of lines of code, and there's actually a new paper out from computer science professor Andrew Appel and Professor Philip Stark, where they talk about how, on average, there's always going to be bugs in the code. And when you have millions and millions of lines of code, then you will inherently have bugs in that code. And those are bugs that hackers can take advantage of. So we know that in the modern systems, in all likelihood, there are bugs. And we've seen that play out at DEF CON, where the machines have been hacked over and over again. So we know that when put to the test, the hackers have been able to penetrate them, as we saw in the clip from Killchain.
Right.
All right. Well, I so appreciate you being with us and just sharing that in such a frank and forthright way. It's really a pleasure to be able to speak to somebody who is just able to talk about this, which is what we need to do. We need to be able to talk about these things and acknowledge what they are, acknowledge that we have problems with our system, because we're not going to be able to solve these problems if we continue to just say, there's no problem here, there's no problem here, and just, you know, move along. That is not how we're going to get to a place where we have confidence in our elections. So we're tremendously grateful to you for all your work and service over the years, and especially for, you know, coming on tonight and sharing your insights with us.
In my experience with looking back into the history of voting technology, what has impressed me is that from the dawn of using technology to count votes in the 19th century, persistently the single biggest source of fraud has been insider fraud. Corrupt political machines who attempt to tinker with the results of elections in order to maintain themselves in power. Most of those machines are city-level machines. The classical Tammany Hall in New York, or Mayor Daley's Chicago, or the Kansas City machine. Occasionally, it's been a state-level thing. The most famous is the Long machine in Louisiana under Huey Long and Earl Long, where basically Governor Long, Earl Long, was the most corrupt of the two. Basically said, you know, give me the right election commissioners and I can make them voting machines sing Home Sweet Home. That's the famous quote from the New Yorker.
Wow. Wow. Maybe we can take a question or two. I know the audio is a little bit choppy, but if you have a question for Professor Jones, do you want to go ahead and try to put it into the comments? And we'll see if we can take at least one or two questions for him. I think we're going to transition for a few minutes and talk about what our current situations are. One example of a situation where we're having issues, for example, in New York, is in Westchester County. And one of the, it's hard sometimes to know, is there corruption, is there incompetence? Sometimes corruption is masquerading as incompetence. Sometimes incompetence is maybe actually just incompetence. Sometimes it's hard to know. So in Westchester County, they had a very, very difficult primary. They had 4-hour-long lines, and they had people sent to the wrong polling locations, given the wrong ballots. It was a mess, and they had their Board of Legislators is investigating that. They had a hearing where just person after person spoke on how frustrated it was for them. And we'll get to that question in one sec, but I just want to kind of wrap this this thread about Westchester. So the commissioners in Westchester have been trying for over a year to buy a set of machines from Dominion called the Dominion ICE machine, which has been declared by election security experts to be extremely insecure, very vulnerable to hackers. And yet the commissioners there have been pushing and pushing and pushing. It's a very expensive machine. They'd like to spend about $6 million on that and their electronic poll books. And somehow their focus on buying these voting machines seems to prevent them from actually conducting efficient elections. So they're spending all their time trying to get these voting machines that on the face of it, it doesn't seem that they need. They have 1,400 voting machines there already. The machines are very expensive, and there's a big outcry in the community. The community doesn't want the voting machines. So I was just wondering if this is kind of something you've seen over the years, where you have a machine or commissioners trying to get a certain type of voting equipment because they think it's going to be able to vote the way they want it to vote. Is this something historically that we do tend to see sometimes?
Well, there are two reflections I have on what you've said. One of them is that for every crook out there, there are thousands of honest people who make stupid mistakes. And believe me, honest people making stupid mistakes can do incredible damage. And there's so many of us out there that you get the 10,000 monkeys typing Shakespeare effect. And the other thing is that the salesman selling voting machines can be extraordinarily powerful in terms of influencing customers. They use all the tricks of the trade that you expect from a used car salesman. And those tricks include sometimes things as nasty as kickbacks and bribery, but sometimes it's just whining and dining and classic arm twisting salesmanship. And a lot of people really buy into it. You can get convinced that the salesman is on your side. And so, for example, the state of Georgia decision to buy the voting machines they recently bought, I can't see any economic or technical justification for it, but boy, were they sold on it. A big, expensive buy. And the previous generation of machines used in Georgia, it's the same story. In New York, we're talking about county-to-time decisions. And I know one of the New York commissioners of elections, I think he's a really good guy, but the county level, there are a lot of counties in New York, and I don't know how many of them are going to get suckered in by a good salesman.
Right. We are concerned that there may be some sort of connection between the salespeople and the election commissioners. The machines are extremely expensive, unnecessarily expensive. They could be getting a much better system for much less. So there does seem to be some unusual behavior there, and it does seem to be connected to very expensive voting machines.
There's another thing, and that is that election systems, what was the company, Automatic Voting Machines, Inc. of New York State, really was the voting machine monopoly in the late 19th century and through the 20th century. They built 90% of all the mechanical voting machines that we have. And Sequoia Voting Systems bought AVM, or bought the voting system division of AVM, and got their salesman. And then Dominion, well, ES&S bought Sequoia, and then Dominion bought the ashes of it when there was an antitrust action. But the result is that the old salesman, the old boy network, coming through the New York State, it was invented here originally. That old boy network is in place and has all the connections inside New York State. And I believe Dominion ended up owning that old boy network as a result of the antitrust actions.
That's just fascinating. So we'll just take one question. I saw Chris had put up one question for us. Does Doug have any insights into why the ballot images are seemingly kept from scrutiny? They would seem like documents that should obviously be made public. That's a question from Bruce Cord. And here in New York, we have tried to get access to the digital ballot images. And for people who don't know what that is, the current modern voting machines, when there's a scanner, it takes a picture of the ballot and it makes what's called a digital ballot image, which is a photographic replication of the ballot. It's exactly what it sounds like, a digital ballot image, a picture of the ballot. And those are all stored on the machine if the setting is correct. And in New York, they keep the digital ballot images, but the courts have ruled that the public cannot have access to them. So it seems kind of pointless. Any ideas about that?
Yeah, the rules vary from state to state. In Wisconsin, those ballot images are public record. And in fact, there is an election integrity group in Madison, which has been FOIAing the ballot images after every election and doing a complete eyeball recount of all the ballots. And they've developed a methodology where they can do an accurate, complete eyeball recount of all the ballots cast in Dane County, which is the capital city. They can do that in a matter of a day.
Yeah, that's Karen McKim's group, Wisconsin Election Integrity. Yes. And actually, the gentleman who just put the question into the comments there, Bruce Korb, actually just led a digital ballot image dry run based on Karen's system. So that's one of the things for people who are thinking about joining Scrutineers. These are the type of skills that we're going to teach you, how to do this, how to FOIA, which is the Freedom of Information Request, how to FOIA documents, how to put together a citizen's audit, all kinds of skills like that are really, really useful. So we're going to say goodnight to you because we're going to have our breakout groups. But it's just been a pleasure to have you here. You're a font of information, and we really, really appreciate you joining us.
Okay. Well, it's been nice to be here.
Okay. Thank you so much. So the next thing that we're going to do, I think, is move into our breakout sessions. I want to just take any questions that we might have for me or about any of the content that we put up today. Are there any questions right now in the comment section? What we're going to...
I've got several questions in the comment section. Do you want me to just pick them?
Yeah, I think that would be great.
All right, let's try this one.
This is from Art L7. What's best, most recent definitive example of rigged voting machine election results? Well, okay. There was a conviction in Philadelphia not that long ago, a Democrat election judge who was actually convicted of going into the booth and literally just pressing the voting button as many times as he could, like kind of looking over his shoulder without getting caught, trying not to get caught. And then he was the election judge, and so he would sign off on the results. Now, he was paid for by consultants, and those consultants were paid for by the candidates. So basically, those candidates were literally buying their votes from the election judge. And what's, I think, to me, the most disturbing thing about the story, he was caught, he was convicted. I believe he was just sentenced. I heard that he was just sentenced. I didn't see the sentencing, but I know he was convicted. But the actual election results that he rigged are still standing, as far as I know. Nobody went back and said these results should be thrown out and we should have this election again. So the moral of that story is it pays to rig. In my opinion, I think we should have penalties, and I also think that when we find out that votes are fraudulent, we should have new elections. Another question?
Sure. Here's another one. Deserves an answer. Let's look.
Okay, this is from Ann Jeff Holmes. Jaffe, not sure about your pronunciation there, Ann. Sorry if I got that right. Right or wrong. Why are voting machines not standardized and thoroughly vetted by the very best minds in America? We actually have to have a whole nother forum on that. So again, please put that in your calendar. Our next forum is August 11th at 7 p.m. and we are going to work through these questions. So this is a very complicated question, but I'm going to just sort of give you the tip of the iceberg here. So the short answer to this, and I'm just getting more and more comfortable with saying it, is it's a feature, not a bug. And what I mean by that is that after all this time, we've had these electronic voting machines since 2002, and it's 2020 now. So that's 18 years. If we really wanted to make them secure and unhackable, we would have. But since we see year after year and generation after generation, where if the old vulnerabilities are patched, new vulnerabilities are actually introduced, and there's new ways to hack the machine and new security problems. So for example, the new machines have barcodes. Barcodes are a real vulnerability. You can do a lot to manipulate votes if you're going to count votes with barcodes. Also, a lot of the new machines, the voting machine itself is printing the paper ballot instead of the voter marking the paper ballot. Those are the ballot marking devices that we were talking about in New York. They're actually all over the country. So that's another vulnerability. For the machine to print the ballot is another opportunity for the machine to change the ballot. So if in fact we wanted secure voting machines, then we would have them, as you said, and the best minds in America would get together and they would develop secure voting machines, and then we would have a mandatory commission that would set up regulations that would have to be followed by counties across the country. But in fact, what we have instead is an almost complete lack of regulation. There was an article from the Brennan Center that I believe said that voting machines are less regulated than, it might have been balloons. I think they're less regulated than balloons. They had a number of things. It might have been bubblegum, balloons, ballpoint pens. Voting machines are less regulated than almost anything. There is actually almost no regulation on voting machines. The commission that regulates the voting machines is called the Election Assistance Commission. It is toothless. They literally do not have the power to regulate. They have no regulatory power. They are a voluntary commission that establishes voluntary voting system guidelines, the PBSG. The PBSG 2.0 is in the process of getting passed. It may in fact be better than the previous PBSGs, which were completely useless. But the answer to your question is, from my opinion, we don't have standardized, thoroughly secure voting machines in the United States because there are people to whom it is advantageous for us not to have completely secure voting machines. That's my answer.
And if I could add to that a reference to John Oliver, those that are in power now got in there under the corrupt system. They're the ones with the vested interest in not fixing it.
This is the face we make in our house for things like this. We go,
ah. Okay, I'm going to post it's not a question, but I'd still like to hear your opinion on it.
All right. Human counts are the way to go. So in that clip that the YouTube, for some reason, prevented us from playing for you, I actually had a little conversation with Russell Michaels about hand counts. He's from the UK, and in UK, they are, in fact, not only marking the ballot by hand for voters who are able to, but they are also counting the ballots by hand in almost every race except for the mayor's race of London, I believe is the one race that they have machines for. But basically, they have lots of people come together and they unfold the ballots in public, and then they count all the ballots in public by hand. And one of the things that Russ was suggesting in that interview was it would not be that difficult to count a few races by hand. Maybe we couldn't count the whole ballot. The US has much longer elections, much longer ballots than many countries around the world. We have many, many races on the ballot for candidates. And then we also in some states have dozens and dozens of referendums. In California, they sometimes have 60 or 70 referendums. So it might be hard to count every race by hand, but we could count the president, the Senate, and the congressional races by hand in public with good chain of custody, and then we would have much, much more confidence in those results. So absolutely, I'm a strong proponent of hand counts, and I know we have people on this call like Virginia Martin, the former Democratic Election Commissioner from Columbia County, New York, who conducted full hand count audits for 10 years there in Columbia County with no problem. And she often says, it doesn't cost that much, it's not that hard, and it doesn't take that long. What's next? I think we should get into our breakout sessions.
Well, let me ask you one more question, because this is a good one, and it's a hard one.
This is Deborah Cohn.
I'm sorry, I clicked on the wrong one.
Okay, sorry, Deborah, not yours.
It moved while I was clicking. Let me get the right question here. Here it is.
This is from Valerie Morshajay. Yeah, Valerie, I'm sorry if I butchered your name. From Valerie, how do you balance raising the flag about election security without completely losing public trust? And I actually am going to go back to Deborah's answer, if you can put that up. Deborah's right about that. There was a study, I believe it was called the Harris study, that indicated that when people are concerned about election security, they're actually more likely to vote. So in terms of actual data that we have about this, the data indicates that this narrative that has been going on for years and years and years, that we can't talk about this issue because our poor little brains will just get too frazzled and we won't vote. We just, we just can't see this information. We're too fragile as voters and we won't go to the polls if we're informed about these things. Actually, it turns out it's just not true. It's just a false narrative, like many of the other narratives that we have found over time have turned out to be false.
That's what I call an obstacle illusion. So while you've been talking, there's been this very vibrant dialogue going on in the chat, and people are asking and answering each other's questions. I think it's really been great, and we've got people really excited here. Okay, so we're going to do our breakout groups now. So here's, and also we're going to do a little bit of promotion. So a couple things. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is our very first YouTube live stream. And although we did get interrupted somewhat rudely by Google, we probably will do more YouTube live streams. We are going to have an active YouTube channel and an active YouTube community. So subscribe to our YouTube channel, send it to your friends, watch our videos. We have really great videos on there now from our Senate briefing. We had Benny Smith, who is an election commissioner and also a hacker, great double title there, came with us to the Senate in last fall and actually demonstrated something very similar to the system, that kind of a modern version of the system that Professor Jones described. It was a vulnerability that he found in the current system that's running in many, many voting machines across the country. The GEMS database that was actually referenced in that Killchain clip, the GEMS database has the ability to count votes fractionally. That means your vote could be like 0.5, half of a vote, and my vote could be 1.5 votes. So if you look in our YouTube channel, you will see a clip of Benny Smith at the Senate
demonstrating that, and it is worth watching, as are many other clips on our YouTube channel. So subscribe to our YouTube channel. I would love it if you would follow us on Twitter. We have our Twitter, I believe, here. I think that's our Twitter. We are at @smart_elections, and you can also follow me on Twitter. I didn't make a banner for it, but it is @Lulu Friesdat. Next time we'll have the @Lulu Friesdat banner also. And you can also follow us on Facebook, and there's our Facebook. It's Smart Elections, as you might think. And what we really, really want you to do is just keep coming back to these forums. We want you to participate in the breakout sessions that we're going to have right now. So I'm going to just explain them. And then we want you to put it in your calendar, August 11th, 7 p.m. Bring a friend so that instead of 100, we're going to have 200. And by September, we're going to have 500. Because as I said at the front, this is not a one-off. This is something you cannot fix overnight. You can, if you just check in and then move on back to your other things, all those other issues. I know everybody is freaked out about everything. There are so many issues out there that we are all so concerned about. But whether or not the vote count is accurate underlies all of the other issues that you're worried about. So the best way to make sure that your other issues get addressed is by spending a little time each week working on election security. And we're going to make that possible for you and fun. So what we're going to do right now is we have some folks who, people who are leaders around the country. We were not able to get every region, but I did speak with North Carolina has an organization. Lynn Bernstein is running North Carolina. It's Transparent Elections North Carolina, I believe is the name of her group. And we have a breakout group from New York through Scrutineers. That's Stephen Hanks is on. I know that Teresa Bassi said she had a group from Indiana. So I know, and I think that April's here who's going to do a group from Massachusetts. I know that Emily is going to do a Zoom for anybody else whose region isn't available or who just wants to get an orientation to Scrutineers. And basically we're going to do, what we decided to do is this. We don't want to put the Zoom links into the comments because we don't want to blow up anybody's Zoom line. So we've asked everybody, all of the leaders that we spoke to ahead of time, please email us your Zoom link. And I'm going to put the email into the comments. So it's contact@smartelections.us. And we should be able to show that now. So that's contact@smartelections.us. So, and you know what, even if you're not a group regional leader, but you know there isn't anybody who is in your region and you want to get started and have a Zoom, you can go ahead and you can send a Zoom link to us right now at contact@smartelections.us. And Chris and I are going to just put those all together in a list real quick, and we're going to shoot them out to everybody. So if you made a reservation for the forum, you're going to get a copy of the Zoom links and you can join whatever group you want. These aren't going to be long meetings. These are basically just like check-in for 10 or 15 minutes. Make contact with someone in your region. Make a commitment to say, I'm going to spend a little time on this. I know how important this is. And I want to spend a little bit of time on it. And we very much encourage you to sign up for Scrutineers. It's a $1.99 lifetime membership. That's just to keep the bots out. And I know I can see April's on the line. Is Emily here also? Because I would love to give Emily like just 3 minutes to give a brief description of Scrutineers to try to
I don't see her. Does she have a link?
You know what? We would have had to send her the link ahead of time. So next time we'll have Emily actually come on and give a little presentation. But I did tell you guys a little bit about what Scrutineers is in the beginning. Scrutineers is an organization founded by Emily Levy, and her project is set up to give you the training and the tools you need to really do this work, to make sure that you have the equipment that is correct and can give you accurate results, and then to audit and find out that in fact that equipment is working correctly, and all of the other many sort of layers and layers and layers that go into making sure that our elections are secure, accurate, accessible, efficient, inclusive, all of the things that we want for our elections to be. Perry, I see you down there. So Perry did some great work in Florida. They did an audit of the 2018 elections, and no, they did an audit of the 2020 elections. They did an audit of the elections that we just had, the primary, and really pulled some great data and were able to find some discrepancies in the election results there. So Perry, I don't know if you have a Zoom link or not, but if you do, shoot it to us at that contact at SmartElections, and we will send that out so that anybody who's in Florida and wants to connect with you can. So I think we're going to wrap now and leave the last bit. It's 8 o'clock, so we had scheduled this till 8:15, and so that's so you can have the last 15 minutes in your breakout sessions. Just check your email, and I would say within 3 to 5 minutes, we'll be able to shoot you any Zoom links that we have. And we're so glad you're here. It is so exciting to have everybody on this call and to see that this community is growing and to feel the passion and commitment that people have to it.
Yeah, relief that's growing. Oh, it's so good to see you all here.
Right. Oh, and you can also sign up for our mailing list. That's another thing that's very important. And you can do that at our website, which is there. You can see the contact at smartelections.us. If you just go to smartelections.us, on the very front page, you will see a place to sign up. Please sign up for our mailing list so that we can keep in touch with you. Okay, so we're going to wrap.
8 o'clock. I guess we're going to wrap it up now. Thanks, Lulu. I wish we could all clap. Is there a way we can clap for you?
I don't know.
Clap on behalf of everybody.
Well, it's like the, happy fingers. Okay. Thanks so much, everybody. Really great to have you here.
Bye-bye, everybody.